Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show reminding you that if your father has the courage to blackmail your coach, you too can play on two different World Cup teams and maybe not deserve either. It's John and Tim back to talk a little bit of Chicago Fire football. Tim, Memorial Day, feeling good. Busy weekend in a lot of ways for us, both literally and also posting online. How are you feeling?
Man, it's crazy to think that the World Cup is like the next soccer that I think most of us, like competitive soccer that most of us will care about, that we're going to get to see played on the men's side. It just is wild. It's still not fully real to me. But hey,
it throws things off. It's exciting. And look, let's kick it off with the most exciting thing, which is go ahead.
I was going to say, like, look, if it feels like we're phoning it in this episode, keep in mind it could have just been an email.
All right. Okay. I told you could do that. I didn't tell you could sneak it in the intro. There would have been a good place for that somewhere. All right, we'll talk about that. I think maybe towards the end we'll talk about that a little bit. Unless you want to just do it now and get it out of the way.
Let's just do it now. Let's do that then finish.
Let me start on a positive. Chris Brady officially going to the World Cup. Well, not officially. As reported by the Guardian, Chris Brady has made the final 26. The 26-man roster for the United States men's national team at the World Cup. Congratulations to Chris Brady. Very, very exciting for him to get that nod, even if it is as a third keeper. And
just to shout out, Alex had the story. I had the story independently of Alex with different sources. So word was getting around. I think that some of the ways that the word was getting around, I think you can piece that together. Let's just say that I think that there's people that are not happy with the way that some of this was handled.
Yeah,
we'll maybe talk about that in a second. But yeah, congratulations. Look, Brady's second Fire player to officially make it to a World Cup. Waterman's still, like that official announcement happens on Friday.
No, that came out already.
Their 32-man roster, not the 26-man, and nothing is final for any team until June 1st. Like, teams can announce whatever the heck they want. They can change it around until June 1st, and it doesn't matter. And part of the reason that that's worth saying is that there are several players that were on the 55-person roster that national teams had to submit, including Hugo Kuipers as one name. And so just, I don't necessarily think he's a favorite to get called up to Belgium, but he's here. And if there's an injury or something like that, like he's an informed striker. He's not going to get intimidated with playing in NFL-sized buildings and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, and Pusta Dittajan also is on the list. I think that's the list of guys.
And let's move along here to
Anton Teletros, I believe, is also on the list, but he hasn't been called in by Graham Potter. So I think that literally this is one of those things, World Cup in the nation where you play club soccer, it's good to be there. Like that gets you on a list.
Yeah, we talked about that last time too. It helps to be playing very well. In the case of Hugo Kuipers, Anton Teletros has some experience with the Swedish national team. Pusa Dittajan, an interesting youngster in general for South Africa. And hey, a spot opens up. There are worse things than just having him sit at the end of the bunch and maybe learn a little bit about what it takes to play at this level, right? And an interesting player, a guy who can do some things if he has the opportunity, even if he likely wouldn't get it on that stage.
He's got a ton of upside, right? Like, and that's the thing. Yeah. Like, every minute that he's played with the Fire, like this guy, you don't know if he's doing something, and he could do nothing. He could, just any inexperienced player could cost you points in 1,000 different ways. I mean, he did get a red card for, I don't know, not going to get into it in the Open Cup, but he has a lot of upside too.
Yeah, no, well put. I mean, we're both very excited about the player he could be. Let's talk a little bit about the nod there, the joke. Look, reports coming out after the 26-man roster was leaked or reported, however you'd like to say it, that all 55 players were notified of their either inclusion or exclusion from the team via email. A fairly stark difference, I think, to 4 years ago. Greg Berhalter, Tim, please correct me if I'm wrong, calling each player individually and delivering the news in both directions. I'll let you kind of...
Berhalter. So yeah, there's this is the other stream. I'll let you finish up your...
No, I was just going to say, I'll let you kind of kick us off and I'll jump in when I need to.
So when you get to a certain point in your career, right? Like there's nobody watching over you telling you how to do your job. And national team head coach is very much like that level. Like you're accountable to people, but there's not someone that's like you're handling this the right way or the wrong way. You can get fired obviously at any time. Berhalter was one into the extreme where he was in frequent communication with a lot of the people in the national team pool, and I think that helped the USMNT get some of the dual nationals into the pool and get them to commit for the USMNT. It helped guys stay connected when, it was between camps, and he would call guys with good news and bad news about selections and stuff like that. Poch has been the opposite. And I don't just mean with the World Cup announcement. I mean, people just don't hear from him in the pool. It's kind of a night and day difference. And that's from multiple players that have talked to various people. It jives with what I've heard. It's just, it's a different style. Now, look, one of the things that I think Poch has felt he's had to change from Berhalter, rightly or wrongly, is making guys, I think, less comfortable. And I think one part of that is maybe making it feel like it's more of a workplace environment where it's not a classy move to fire somebody or whatever by an email, but it happens not infrequently sometimes, depending on the role and stuff. And maybe this is part of it. It's email is a form of business communication. It is a job. Playing for the national team, you come, you work hard. Maybe that's what he's going for. It doesn't seem like the right call here.
Can I just say, I don't want to swear because I don't want Austin to have to deal with this. It's pretty messed up if you get fired over an email.
Yeah,
it just is.
No, for sure.
And look, that is on the lowest level as somebody who has disciplined employees below them. You don't do that via email. That's just not how that works.
Or telling someone they've got a job via email, right?
Yeah,
you can be
exactly.
we'll email over the offer letter, but you still call.
Even if there's, exactly. Again, having offered and received offers for jobs, it always goes, hey, just want to let you know, sending an offer letter over now. You'll find the details in there. Give me a call back once you've had a chance to review it. But aside from there was a lot of, I think I'm not going to have quite the same tenor you here are, Tim, of professionalism, because I don't know, I don't really feel the need to in some ways, because this isn't what we cover on a regular basis.
For sure.
But also because it irks me in a lot of ways. I don't think Mauricio Pochettino has the requisite level of respect for this role that he should. And I think this was another example of that. And there's a lot of people defending him in comment sections and on Twitter of, oh, well, it's going to take him hours to call 55 people. No, it's not. It's going to take him 2 hours max. And not only that, you could have yourself, your top assistant, and maybe somebody else from the federation call guys and say, hey, we'll send over a more detailed, reasoning of why we didn't include you, but just wanted to let you know we chose not to include you. It's ridiculous to me that anybody thinks this is acceptable.
It's a World Cup. He's getting paid $15 million a year. He is making World Cup selections one time. And
$15 million, and he can't call you on the phone.
Just call, the 55 guys that were on the preliminary roster. It is a 30-second phone conversation, and let them know, I mean, it's just one way or the other. You'd think that for the guys that you're calling in, you would want that conversation because it lets you judge their state of mind and gravity and stuff like that. I mean, look, I don't know. My closing thought on that, I guess, is this. Between that and some of the people that are and are not in the World Cup squad, he's kind of putting himself in the same boat as Thomas Tuchel, where, he is either going to look like an absolute genius and a hero in, a month and a half, or he will never be able to show his face in the country that he's now coaching the national team of ever again after this. There's not really an in-between.
No, and look, I've talked personally, not necessarily here about, Greg Berhalter's greatest skill as the national team coach was recruiting, right? Look at all the dual nats he won. There's a lot of guys still playing on this team that will be very important that came here.
That and beating Mexico.
Yeah, well, in part because he took a lot of Mexican-American players, right? And you look at the overall state of this roster. You include Gio Reyna, you don't include Diego Luna. I've been critical of Diego Luna, but you ousted Brian Gutierrez to get Diego Luna. You're not bringing Diego Luna. Brian Gutierrez is scoring goals for Mexico. You can disagree
I'm not
about
sure
if Brian Gutierrez would have made this team.
I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily that, but it's also just
that
the
is how
process
it
that you
read
got
from
there.
the outside. Would that be a
Yeah,
fair?
Sure, there's always some players that are treated differently, right? And like I guess Gio Reyna is somehow in that camp, despite having played fewer minutes since the 2022 World Cup than like some guys playing a season. Whatever, right? Not the time to relitigate all that. Why did you bring Diego Luna in for so many of the
17 of
previous
the last
games?
18 matches he has played in.
And so that is a job that someone has to do that they did not do for 17 of the past 18 matches for the USMNT. It's that simple.
And then on top of that, you look at the rest of the roster. You brought like 19 defenders. I'm exaggerating, obviously, and not one of them was Noah Kai Banks, who I'm not even super jazzed about it. But
well,
like, man, if you're going to bring that many defenders,
did Noah Kai Banks get? Was there a discussion? Did he not want to commit now? Because maybe he did. I mean,
and that to me, it's like the other side of the coin. But you mentioned before of this is not a guy who is reaching out to players and staying in contact and trying to win them over. And now you've got a 19-year-old who could be the best defender in the pool who's going to go play for Germany, right?
Maybe Noah Kai Banks just got like the form email, but like they weren't sure where to put. So it just said, congratulations, you are/are not in the 2026 FIFA World Cup squad for the U.S. men's national team. Exactly. And he's like, I don't even know what to think.
Yeah. Look, I think that we may talk more World Cup at some point. Let us know in the comments if you want us to talk more World Cup. I think
one other thing, just while I was talking World Cup, last thing about it, Guti's goal for Mexico. I mean, that thing was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, man. He unfortunately he did exactly what we spent all of last season saying he needed to do, which was leave the nest, spread his wings, and learn to fly, as it were.
Well, that's and you know what? It was going to be sink or swim for him as soon as he got to Guadalajara, and he's been swimming, and like that is not an easy place to swim. Very especially in some ways because he has more pressure than I think a lot of American-raised players have going to Mexico. One, because of the club, and two, because of what the club means to his family and the fact that they are all within driving distance of seeing him play at Chivas. So,
yeah, no, 100%. And look, there's a very real chance that at the opening match of the World Cup, Brian Gutierrez will be starting for Mexico. I don't know if he will.
And Mkazeli Mboazi, which I want the Mbokazi Brian Gutierrez one. Like, I just want that to be a moment. I'm so here for that.
That would be a lot of fun, actually. But look, let's talk about the game that actually happened. And yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll talk more World Cup later on. We probably will because we can't help it. Chicago Fire winning their final game before the said World Cup break 2-1 over a much depleted but Josh Sargent reinvigorated FC Toronto side. I always love when pregame we're both like, there's no way this guy plays. And then not only does he play, he scores a goal. That's just how life works, I suppose. Robin Lod opens the scoring on a beautiful feed that started at the feet of Mbazeli Mboazi, goes to Hugo Kuipers, back into Marin Haile Selassie, and Robin Lod converts the goal. Josh Sargent ties it up on a screamer. I mean, just nobody was stopping that goal. And then Andrew Gutman knocks home the header for the win in the 65th minute. Fire hold on to get all 3 points at Soldier Field.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things to me, well, one, do you want to talk about squad selection really quick? There's just the one, I guess, that we want to talk about.
The only big rotation, right, you allude to there, Mauricio Pineda starts for Jay Davila. Not the best performance from Mauricio, but notable nonetheless that Greg gave him the start in this one.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it worth talking about. Now, Jay did come on for Pineda, and, Greg after the game said, look, this is what you want guys to do, right? Like you want when a guy's taken out of the starting 11 to prove that the coach made a mistake. And I think that Jay had his best game that I've seen from him in a while. Like it was a strong performance from him from the time that he came on. And what was it, like the 60 something minute?
It's 61st.
A little bit after that, yeah. It was a strong performance from him. Now it wasn't like a lights out, although the Fire did not allow any goals after that point, obviously, but it was a good, like, solid workmanlike performance. He was doing a lot of the things that you'd want a central defensive midfielder to do. I mean, even like I can't remember the last time he had that solid shot. it was basically, I think, just like get it on net because Gavron's been leaving a bunch of rebounds, and then it's kind of in the mixer, and just see what happens after that if he does leave a rebound. Like he wasn't. I don't think he would have liked to have scored from that distance. I don't think he was really planning on it.
Yeah, it was very much a rebound, first touch. Let's see if we can get one on frame. And Gavron, to his defense, that game probably could have been 3 or 4-1. A good game from not the best keeper in the league. I'll say it nicely like that. But no, agreed. And we talked before the game about, like, frankly, Mauricio Pineda's gotten some criticism this year. I think part of that is seeing less minutes makes it harder to step into a role like that. Difficulties kind of just understanding the midfield roles in general seems to be a common trend throughout this year, just in terms of spacing and handling the ball. I will say the nice thing about a Mauricio Pineda is I don't worry about him from game to game. I think he'll probably give you about the same level of performance no matter what, outside of the occasional normal variance. It was great to see Jay, to your point there, come off the bench and really just be engaged with the game and play at a high level. Like, he looked good. He looked confident. He wasn't kind of, the mistakes he made, he didn't look like he was rushing to correct them. He looked like he just kind of accepted what they were and moved on with the game. And that was, we talked about in the pregame how important that was going to be for him. You got 2 months where you're not playing competitive soccer. To leave with a good memory in his mind, I think is massive.
It's huge. And I thought it would have been fine if he left without a minute in this one. Not, necessarily. I think he was a positive coming on for Pineda with the performance that he had, but I think just in terms of like that arc, it would have been fine to not see him in this one, just give him some time to stop, think, and reset. I think it's a lot better for him to come on and had that kind of positive result.
Yeah. Oh, and I think the other side of the coin here, another game of 4-4-2 for the Fire. The Robert Lewandowski rumors are only heating up. Jay Davila is when Andre Franco comes back, the question becomes who heads the bench, right? And is it Jay Davila or is it Anton Saletros? And at a game like that, we saw Andre and Jay play together well in essentially a 2-man midfield at times last year. And I wonder how important that could be for him to continue to see those minutes when Andre is back and you hypothetically still have really a 2-man midfield, right? Yeah,
no, it puts more pressure on that position. And Jay has the ceiling, and we've talked about this 1,000 times. I don't think we need to get into it again, but like he has a really high ceiling. It's just that he has not consistently come close to it. And when sometimes he's been a lot closer to like digging a new subfloor, new level to the basement than he has to the ceiling. So it's good to see that. I mean, and that's honestly more than any one thing that he can do with like his first touch or his positioning or anything like that. That is the thing that he needs to work on to take the next step. Yeah, it really is not 100%, but a large percentage, just his mentality and his ability to stay focused and not, not let those things snowball. The other guy who I think came back from what I have to imagine was a tough mental, if not just physical space, Robin Lod. That is 2 very good performances in back-to-back games for him. Scores that opening goal on a really nice finish. Frankly, one I don't know that we would have seen him convert 4 or 5 weeks ago. If that's, I don't know if you feel like that's fair, but that's what I was thinking in the moment. Another nice performance from him on the Fire side. He's on the short list for the match. He's quietly been getting better and better, right? And like, I think he's one of the other talking points because, to the first half of the season, there were only a couple midweek games. The second half, I don't know why they backloaded it this much, but there's a ton. Like, the League's Cups, it's one of these chances, in some ways probably the best chance the Fire have at this point of making it to CONCACAF next year, just because if you get the right results at the right times, there's a ton of slots available in that tournament. And you got, 3 days between games and like that's it. And so you're going to need every member of your squad performing close to what it is they can. And a guy like Robin Lod, like when he was signed, you're thinking he's going to be one of those guys that you can depend on game in, game out, even if he's not a starter. Wasn't playing like that before. Now it looks like he's finally starting to. I got to ask Greg about him after the game, and what he said was, he reminded us of like scoring the goal in DC. So that makes it his, that's 2. This one was his 3rd. He's a guy that you get on the field because he's such a smart soccer player, Greg said, and he makes other people better. Even though he may not be putting up the numbers he would like, we think is valuable to this group. He's a tremendous hard worker, good positioning, smart player, and helps the rest of the team. And in terms of the hard work, I mean, like, the dude's playing with like broken parts of his face, you know?
Look, and that's what I think we've been talking about for a large portion of this year is as critical as we've been of him. It's like, you know the effort is there. You know the player is in there somewhere. Just give it some time, and it's bound to come around, even if I think at a lot of different times you and I were both, if not you, definitely me, we're both saying, get him off the field. Like, please, just give him a reset. And I wonder if, I didn't want to say it at the time, I wonder if the injury in some ways was a positive of, look, you got to step away for a week, maybe reset and come back out with a new mindset.
I still think that it's entirely possible that there were other things going on with that. Like, I think that he may have had some kind of, he missed a little bit of preseason, right? So he wasn't fully fit coming in. It's sometimes hard for guys to get into that status when you're playing match in, match out. I don't know if that's the case. And part of it was like he was being thrown into a bunch of different positions, which is one of his assets, but it's a new team, new city, new system for him. And a lot of those positions were not necessarily the ones that you'd think of as being his best.
And it feels like nobody has been put in their best position. And look, we haven't really talked about it yet, but the Fire, look, for missing arguably your most important creator outside of Philip Zinkernagel.
Creative midfielder for sure, right? Yeah, creative force.
Poor performances from Robin Lod. Jay Davila not looking like himself for large swaths of the season. On top of Jonathan Bamba missing time, Hugo Kuipers, Philip Zinkernagel missing time. They're third in the
Fire
East.
Took until it was like game 10 before it was like game 8 or 9. But they hadn't played the same starting 11 2 games in a row up until that point. And they have still been switching things up, which is normal in some ways. But in this case, it wasn't because of giving guys opportunities and stuff. It was because somebody would come back in the lineup, somebody would come out. And that just makes it difficult. Yeah,
and to that end, right, this team enters the break third in the East. Technically, not technically. They're a point ahead of New England. Sorry, my eyes betrayed me there. I thought they were tied. A point ahead of New England, 26 points, 8-2-4. And look, I think it's easy to sit here and say on a micro, you probably drop 5 points in there. You switch those around, you're maybe sitting above Miami right now. But third in the East with what they've had to deal with, it feels pretty good, especially considering you have flexibility on top of what you hope is, Robin Lod getting essentially a second preseason, Jay Davila ending on a high note, hopefully building on that. And Andre Franco coming back as well.
Everyone getting a second preseason too, right? And the Fire having the capability, whether it's Lewandowski or somebody else, to add a significant piece in a DP. I mean, there's a lot of upside that the team can have. And we'll do a big macro picture, I think, at some point, probably in our next episode. But I think the Fire have to be pretty good, just with where they're feeling coming out on 3 wins in a row. I thought the second half performance, and this is maybe something we can dig into better, but since they switched to this 4-4-2, I think that this was the most convincing defensive performance they've been able to put together. And something that Greg said after the game, and I don't know, I would want your opinion on it. He's like, I don't know how Toronto doesn't have more points than they've got with the way that they play. And they played a tough game, and they've been losing games, they've been missing a ton of people. They've been losing games, but they haven't been getting steamrolled in games. They've been competitive and they've been in games. They're not an easy, team to play against.
Yeah, I mean, look, Toronto, for reference, right? Only a -7 goal differential, which I know may sound like a lot, but given the fact they've lost 6 games, you're losing by, there's just not, it's a razor thin margin, I guess is what I'm trying to say for them. And look, they've done that. I know it's not a lot, but they've done that missing so many guys. Josh Sargent has barely played. You saw, I think without Josh Sargent, that game goes entirely differently. You saw how talented he is and maybe why not a lot of people, but some people are upset he's not going to the World Cup. No, I get it completely. And I agree with you in terms of look, there were large swaths of this game where Toronto controlled possession. Toronto was pressing. They were having opportunities. Ironically, their goal didn't really come off of that, right? Their goal came off a poor play from Mauricio Pineda and a screamer from Josh Sargent. But Toronto had large stretches of this game where they were in control, and the Fire absorbed that pressure in a way we haven't seen with this 4-4-2. I was waiting for that second goal to come, and it never did. To the credit
honestly, in the second half,
defense.
I don't know how you felt about this. When Toronto got the equalizer, it did feel like a second goal was maybe on the way. And I thought, the Fire just needed to get to half. And I hadn't thought about what the team needed to do after that, because it's like, because so far there hadn't been a lot of halftime adjustments that looked effective, staying in that 4-4-2 with what the Fire needed to do. But I think it was huge that Robin Lod got the team ahead. I thought that if the Fire got ahead, it would change the game enough where they could probably win. It wouldn't have surprised me if they had been able to win by more when that first goal went in relatively early, like first 25 minutes. But, the way that they tightened it up, and this is true, I think, even before Mauricio Pineda came off for Jade Avila, like, I think they tightened up a lot in the second half, and it looked much more cohesive defensively. And like, I think that shows with a lot of the sort of like the way that the game played. Like Toronto only had 4 second half shots. None were on target. They only had 7 touches in the Fire's box. Like they had 20 something in the first half. Like it was a different game in the second half because of effective adjustments from Greg Berhalter, some of which were subs, but a lot of which were not subs.
Yeah, in some ways, I think it seemed, I mean, you may have an actual answer to this, it did seem like those 60th minute subs, Mboazi and Pineda coming off for Waterman and Davila respectively, seemed pre-planned, which not a bad thing at all, right? It makes sense, especially given the World Cup status for Mboazi.
The funny thing about that is you're taking off one World Cup bound center back for another. It's like, yeah, we want this guy to stay healthy for the World Cup. But
ironically, though, I think it actually kind of helps Joel if it's like, oh, he came on 30 good minutes of relief, defense
for sure
in that game.
It's
right?
a different.
So it's kind of funny. It was somebody sitting next to me was like, oh, I think they're just taking him off for the World Cup. I was like, ironically, I think they're also bringing Joel on to try and go to the World Cup. Like that's just how that works when you're different levels of player, I suppose.
But look, the fact that the team is able to make those kinds of adjustments, I think, is something that we hadn't seen enough of, and like that's been another common criticism of Greg, rightly or wrongly. We've talked about the subs some. Again, like subs are not the only way to change games.
But there is a common theme there, right? We've seen early subs in all 3 of these wins, not necessarily early, but 60th-ish minute. I don't think that's nothing. Right? Like, I think it has something to do with the game. I also think you saw how important Jade Avila was in this win, right? Because he was, I wouldn't go so far as to say he's man of the match, right? He played 30 minutes. But when you have a functional Jade Avila in midfield, it really does change the look of that 4-4-2 because he does so much defensively, right? And I think as much as we miss Leonardo Barroso, a good game from Jonathan Dean. And again, when you have those 2 guys playing defensively, it really does change the outlook of what the defense can do and how they can kind of manage that shape, both in transition and just out of possession.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like, again, there's just a lot of guys that I think are leaving for the World Cup break on a high note, which is exactly what you wanted to see, right? Like, it wouldn't have been entirely surprising going into half if the Fire had a draw, which would have been probably just unsatisfying for everybody. But with the changes they made, getting out with a win, I think it, again, and just like the way that they did it, like they should really be going on vacation or to World Cups with their head held high. I mean, it is like a lot of guys are going on vacation. Like it's going to be something that's going to happen every year.
3 weeks off, like they should.
Yeah. Mandatory by the CBA. So yeah, Greg Gutman joked afterwards, like, yeah, I think Greg would probably be giving us less if he could. And
wouldn't we all? Yeah, who does? Look, last thing here. Maybe not last thing, but last thing for now. Tim, you had it in your 5 things worth noting. Chicago Fire, based on. I'm not going to butcher it. I'm going to let you say it. There's a statistic out there that does not bode well for the Fire coming back from the World Cup break in terms of their strength of schedule.
So if you look at basically the expected goal difference of different matchups based on how teams play against each other, using American Soccer Analysis's data, which is fantastic, and I'm glad to be able to get access to that for stuff like this. I ranked every club in MLS based on how much easier or harder their schedule gets after the break versus before. And the Fire have one of the biggest jumps in terms of difficulty. It's the only teams that have it harder after the Fire going forward are Charlotte, who the Fire play twice, San Diego, who knows what's going on with him. I still feel like they could get better results, and then there's the Fire. So like, that's not great if you're the Fire. And by the way, Philadelphia and I mean, whether it's Bradley Carnell or somebody else, and Portland with whoever's coming in to replace Phil Neville now, that's official. I mean, they could look like geniuses because their schedules. I mean, like the predicted XG difference after the World Cup is like 0.25, above 0.2 in favor of those teams coming out of the break, which is just a huge when you think about what a fifth of a goal per game can do over the course of 20-ish games.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the other side of the coin, right? You look at this first half, Fire third in just in terms of expected goal difference, right? In terms of what actually happened. It's weird because I think looking back, especially on that note, Tim, it feels like they may have left something on the table. They may have left some meat on the bone with some of these games, right? You look at both Cincinnati games. You look at that first DC game. Like, it feels like you could be getting out of here in pole position for the Supporters' Shield race, and instead you're in the picture, but you're not really in the picture.
Something I said to somebody that works at the club before the game is like, look, one thing, like the Fire have really just beaten themselves in every loss that they've had, right? Like there's not been a single game where it's like the team played decently, they played to their capacity, and they were just outplayed, like either an effort level or in terms of skill level or tactics. Like that has not happened once so far. And in a way that's difficult because it's like you're beating yourself, right? Like that game in Houston, like the Fire's first loss of the season, that was an entirely winnable game. And it was not a game that they won. It's a game that they lost, and they would have 3 more points then, right? Like, I mean, but at the same time, that gives you an obvious thing of like, there's not a question of like, oh, are we just not good enough? Are we like, do we need to make changes with the squad? I mean, yes, you want to try to improve. You're beating yourself, and so it's tightening things up and just doing what you're doing a little bit better, and then some of those losses just would disappear if you had the opportunity to replay them.
Yeah, look, we'll talk about this, I think, as the window goes on, just because things will fall into place and we'll be able to discuss it more clearly. I hear what you're saying about the expected goal difference. I'm curious to see what that looks like at the end of the year. I do think there's going to be a lot of falling and rising for especially a lot of Western Conference teams.
Yeah, some of it's based on who you're playing against the other, right? Like part of the reason that I did the analysis, Paul Harvey from the Outfield podcast that covers NYC, I don't know if he ever published it, but he sent, in a couple of circles, that graphic preseason, and that's based on 2025 data. So I reran it based on the games that were played through Saturday. And for some teams it's significantly different. For some teams it's not that different. The Fire looked like they were going to have the second or third biggest gap in terms of like much more difficult after the World Cup on both preseason and this ranking. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But it's going to continue to change, and that's the reality of it.
I'm just saying it more from like a curiosity perspective, just because I think this break is particularly unique, especially for some teams who, frankly, have the ability to spend money, and now have new coaches, new sporting, or will have new chief soccer officers, sporting directors, whatever it is, right? And even just looking at like the Western Conference, right? Like, is Real Salt Lake going to stay at third in the West? Is San Jose really going to stay that high? Is Preston Judd going to keep being Matt Doyle's MVP pick? I don't think so. Matt Doyle, shout out Matt Doyle, friend of the show. Tactics Free Zone, free plug. There you go.
To be
Matt.
fair though, it did look like San Jose could be screwed if it wasn't for, just with the absence that they've had. And then Preston Judd shows up out of nowhere. And when you've got like 3 guys on your squad that can be that guy, you're in pretty good shape.
100%.
Now, San Jose's, just based on the data we've got so far, San Jose's schedule is getting easier. Not tremendously, but notably about like point 0.1, expected goals in their favor. Expected goal differential, just to be clear about what the unit of analysis is. And there's some teams that are going to fall. Some like Salt Lake's schedule is getting harder, which means it has been easier, which makes them more likely to fall. But some that I think are surprising this year, like the Colorado Rapids, have the number 3, biggest gap in their favor, like biggest jump in their favor after the World Cup. And I think that they've surprised people with how good they are. And that suggests that they could be better just,
and
afterwards.
9 losses, which is crazy for Colorado. Didn't see that coming.
Sorry, what?
They have 9 losses in this first half.
Yeah. But they've played well in a lot of it, right? Like
that's what I'm saying. Like I think we would most people who are watching the league would say they're a good team. They have 9 losses. Like that's I'm just saying goes to show like there could be a significant swing in the back half of the year. That's all.
For sure.
That's all.
Yeah. And I think that we're going to, and look, the Fire, like the Revs are, in terms of the schedule difference gap that we've been talking about, they're like almost level with the Fire on this. And considering they play each other, like that alone could be, the biggest factor with these things. So that suggests that maybe both the Revs and the Fire are kind of maybe in for a fall. I feel like the Revs are more likely to than the Fire, just because of the things that we talked about here. Like it's year 2 with the Fire under Greg Berhalter. It's year 1 for the Revs under Mitrovic. I think that the Fire squad is closer to what it needs to be competing for trophies than it is for the Revs. So, who knows?
Yeah. All in all, an interesting read. Would recommend reading the 5 things, and then also taking a closer look at some of that data. It's interesting stuff. And if you're not familiar with American soccer analysis, you can go to goalsadded.com. They have some really cool stuff up there. Would highly recommend giving it a look and a read. They do really good stuff if you're into the sicko side of MLS. I'll say that. But also, even if you're not, like it is very consumable, very easy to understand, generally speaking, at least. Higher numbers are better. I don't know if you guys know that. No,
and they do more than just goals added. Like, I forget, I'm blanking on the person that put together the goals added chart, but it's based on the American Soccer Analysis data on American Soccer Analysis website, which I think it's just americansocceranalysis.com. They have explainers on how all of these things are calculated, and I think that's really a useful read if you're trying to get it from someone that's like heard these statistics and kind of knows like good or bad to wanting to understand how they work.
This really offers you, the humble listener, the opportunity to do, instead of looking at box scores, just look at goals added. And then when you want to argue with people online, you'll look even smarter, I swear.
Which is always the way that you win arguments on the internet.
Yep, just look smarter. No, look, I think that kind of brings us to a good point here. Just a couple programming notes before we get into our Man of the Match awards. We'll have like kind of a first half post-mortem coming out probably next week. I would say keep an eye tuned for that. We'll obviously make you aware when it's available. And then we are kind of planning the rest of our window here. We expect to have some form of World Cup coverage. Obviously, we'll cover any kind of transfer news and intrigue that may come alive. If you have an interest in a more in-depth World Cup thing from us, it would probably be a little less formal than we do it here. But let us know. We're curious. If you also don't want that, that's fine too. But we are trying to flush out our plans for the summer as well. Tim, anything you want to share with the listeners before we start our Man of the Match here?
No, I mean, I think we'll continue to have coverage out. Like I've got pieces coming up, like we talked about the Soccer House, kind of not like, I don't know, not a review exactly, but just like, information about it, what I experienced, photo tour, that kind of thing. And a lot of other content that I just haven't had time to write with matches happening as often as they have. So that'll be coming out over the next few weeks. And yeah, we'll continue to be around.
Love it. As always, you can find that at menofred97.com. Tim, I feel like there's a semi-obvious answer here. Who was your Man of the Match from Saturday?
I mean, I just got to say Robin Lod, just with the getting that early goal, and just the fact that he's improved and is hitting his stride at the right moment. That's exactly what you wanted to see from the guy.
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually going to go. I mean, shout out Andrew Gutman for the goal. I'm going to go Philip Zinkernagel. I thought he played really well. That assist on the final goal, obviously massive, beautiful ball in, plays it only where Gutman can get it. I thought another really good game from him. I would probably agree Robin Lod, just because that was maybe the best we've seen him in a Fire shirt. But I was impressed with Philip Zinkernagel. Another game with a goal contribution for him. Also worth pointing out, Hugo Kuiper's goal streak did end, right? We didn't really talk about it, kind of because it's sad. But he did have a goal contribution. So that is 11 straight games with a goal contribution now. So, it's on the board.
Still scoring. Just not scoring.
Look, it was a tough game for him in terms of shooting. I did think Hugo played well overall, though, just in terms of connecting play and doing kind of the dirty work we don't always expect
right? It's one of those things where if he had the same performance, 3 or 4 times, he'd have 2 or 3 goals in them. Just it wasn't this one.
Yeah, Puso set him up beautifully too. But again, Gavron played well. Hats off to him. I'm off track though. We're off the rails. That's a good as place as any to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for tuning into the Bonfire. As always, you can stay tuned to menandred97.com. It's where you'll find all the latest breaking news, analysis, updates. And now that we're getting into the window, transfer rumors, baby. We'll have them for you as soon as they're out and about. We'll be talking about them. We'll be yelling at each other about them. One of us will be arguing with people online about them. Probably Tim, not me, guys. Yeah. Okay,
because I'm the one that does that. Yeah.
Hey, I don't argue per se. I debate. Okay? Tim. No, but stay tuned to menandred97.com. That's where you'll find all the latest and breaking news regarding Chicago Fire at large. You can stay tuned to the socials as well, menandred97, anywhere and everywhere that matters. We'll be posting, sharing, all sorts of things there. We do have some news stories coming out over the scale of the next few weeks. So keep your eyes there, and we'll keep you updated with everything that we have. And last but not least, wherever you're listening to this, if you go ahead, give it a like, a subscribe, a rate, a share, a thumbs up. Not a thumbs down. I want to be clear about that. Only the one that goes up. It does go a long way in terms of growing the reach. And wherever you're at, leave a comment. It can be whatever you'd like. Anything you want. But we would appreciate it if you did. It actually does help with the algorithm in some weird way. Also, oh my God, I haven't mentioned this Thursday, we have hot takes. Let me look at the thing. I apologize,
yes,
Matt.
It is this Thursday.
This Thursday, May 29th. Yeah, I'm an idiot. This Thursday, May 29th, new episode of Hot Takes Live. So if you haven't already submitted your takes, go ahead. You can go over. It's actually on the site now, so go to menandred97.com. There's actually a page where you can submit your takes there, or you can obviously find the post on the socials and follow that link as well. We're excited for that. That'll be good. The guys will have some, just kind of recapping the first half and then also talking a little bit of World Cup too. So exciting there. Excited to see Matt and Alan and Danny back at it again. But all of that to say thank you so much for being here, for listening, and thank you for joining us around the Bonfire. For Tim, for our illustrious producer, Austin, I'm John. Thank you so much, and come on, you men and